Well, you need a few more steps before you reach this, because you need to define first your own definition of responsible AI, of how you define ethics in your own business. You need to define what are the principles and what are the criteria that define this within your organization. And then probably after that, you need an audit to check your current applications and your applications to come, how responsible AI they are, if they have biases, if they are secure enough, if the outcome is handled properly, and so on and so forth. So usually our clients who work on responsible AI have a much more holistic approach. Not only a question of data or processes, is the entire end-to-end. Well, it depends on your definition of what owning the data means. And actually, if you look, we changed the topic a bit from responsible AI, but the modern tendency in data governance is that data ownership is always in the business. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that we take them out of IT. It's IT that still handles them and cures them and curates them. But the decisions and the plan for that come from the business. So also the decisions for responsible AI also come from the business. Responsible AI is too complicated and especially too different and new a topic. So not our clients care yet for responsible AI. Many of them do. Everyone that has to do with B2C relationship, where their actions and products and services are in direct contact with the consumers. All the ones that have to do with healthcare, all the ones that have to do with pharma, they care already. It's obvious that it's much more important for a healthcare company than for somebody who manages, excuse me, for somebody who manages a refinery. So for these companies, they have built a new position, a new responsibility, which, it depends on the company. Sometimes called the responsible AI director, it's called the chief ethics officer, etc. And this is the person or entity who take care of responsible AI. And as I said, there are multiple steps. You need first define what exactly you mean by that, where you are, what are the criteria, and then define what is your situation right now, and then take it from there, depending on the priorities you will see and how many biases or non-biases you find, you take it from there. It's very easy, it's enough to look at the press almost every day, and almost every day if you open the Wall Street Journal or the Times or the Les Echos in France or the Handelsblatt in Germany, you have examples of non-responsible AI, which very often have a direct impact on the operations of the company and therefore on the share value, on the value of the company. So the public is more and more interested in one of the researches we did, because it's a topic on which BCG works for the last 3 years. We found that more than 80% of the people consider that AI nowadays is not managed sufficiently ethically. And this is why, by the way, the first step was, as you probably know, the European Commission just issued a regulation, a draft regulation for now, will be discussed in the next 18 months, on AI, where 80% of the regulation has to do with the ethical aspects of this and how do you manage high-risk cases, etc. So believe me, the appropriate business, as we said, not all business entities, and not if somebody is only in managing a supply chain, probably it does not have any ethical issues. But somebody who sells products, who sells services, or decides how somebody will take a specific medicine or not, these kind of people do have ethical issues that they need to address. And artificial intelligence is more and more involved in this area, so it becomes a bigger and bigger problem. No, it's something else. There is what you said. There is the philosophical, stance, which says that anyhow a government needs to work for the good of the people. But if you go beyond this, there are real reasons for which a government needs to take care of that. And actually, many governments around, including in the region, have taken a very proactive stance in that. The first reason is that it has artificial intelligence and its application has an asymmetrical impact on a government's trust and legitimacy. Our researchers found that when people are concerned, are happy with the way AI works, the governmental AI works, that gives a 4% boost in their in the trust. But when it has a negative impact, it gives more than 20% decrease in the trust in the government. That's the first reason. The second reason, which is kind of a corollary of the first, is that AI anyhow will expand, will spread out, especially in governmental sector. So if the people know that the government works in a responsible way on AI, that will decrease the barrier to entry and will help adoption. There's a third reason that we found actually to our surprise, which is the war of talent, the attraction and retention of high-end specialists. What our research found, it was in a specific country, but we believe the same applies to all countries, even if the proportions are a bit different. We found that 1 out of 6 data scientists, that's a very high percentage, almost 17%, has quit a job because the job would involve to do something that they didn't consider ethical, so they left. Let's keep in mind that nowadays data scientists, data engineers are in very high demand. And especially governmental jobs very often don't pay as much as the private sector, so it's very easy for them to jump ship, leaving a governmental job and go somewhere else. So for both roles, it depends on the company, as we said, because systematically, by definition, not all companies are as much concerned by responsible AI as some others. In some companies, it is already the responsibility of the CEO to oversee this, and the chief ethical officer very often either is directly under the CEO or the COO. Now, the CIO will need to implement the changes that will be necessary after the audit and after we found if there are problems of data. As I said before, the problems don't always arise from the data. Very often they do, because some data are biased, but the problems can come from the way the algorithms are built, or they can come from the way either upstream or downstream the outcomes of AI are used. So the CIO, of course, has an important role, but he's not the only one. Doing behavioral analysis is not wrong. Everybody does behavioral analysis. Of course, social media having more data and most of them being behavioral data, I mean, they do more than the others. Again, here, when it might become non-ethical is what they do with this. So, of course, if they try to infer certain behavior and this behavior is not ethical, of course, it's a question of responsible AI. Now, of course, I don't work for social media, so I cannot comment much more, but obviously the social media arena is one of the first ones that raised questions about responsible AI.